Hello and welcome back. So, today I want to talk to you about your intuition. Yes, learning to trust your gut. Why is that important? Why is something you should do? Well, first of all, our brains detect threats in a very fast pace, faster than our conscious mind can actually perceive and understand. So, what happens is that intuition is actually your brain picking up little signs that you, with your normal, you know, processor in your mind, you can really pick up them so fast. So your brain does that for you and it sort of stores it over time. It manages to like save in a backlog in your head all the signals and little, facial expressions, actions, words, tones, whatever people do around you, it manages to save that information in a different way that you're not intentionally processing it, but it's there. And that's when you get that strange feeling of, okay, that's something off, you know? You can't really quite tell what it is. You can't really put your finger on it, but your brain has already picked up some signs, okay? And I think that's how intuition works. It's basically your body, your own defense telling you, okay, there are some signs here, some patterns that we've seen before. We're recognizing the situation and back in the moment, right? Because the more trauma you have in your life, and that's a sad way to go about it, but it's how it works. The more experiences you have in your life, the more that knowledge of what is a threat and what is good for you, it grows. Okay? So basically, like if you go through a traumatic breakup or if you go into a toxic relationship, you begin to recognize the patterns. You begin to recognize what those people are like, how they act in the beginning, how they treat you, what kind of conversations they have. When someone's trying to manipulate you, I mean, the first few times, you may not really know what's going on. But once you realize what's happening, next time someone tries to manipulate you or sell you something or make you believe something about yourself, your brain already knows what is the way that people act. Okay? Of course, there are many new tricks in the book nowadays. Like, you will eventually run into people that have a great skill or a different way of manipulating you. Okay? However, throughout your life, you're going to sort of like store that information, and that information is going to be what we call your intuition. Okay? It's going to signal to you, okay, there's something wrong here. And that's very important because that really saves you time in your life. It saves you from, emotional pain, turmoils, and stuff like that. So it's really important to trust your intuition. Every time I didn't trust my intuition, I later regretted it naturally because since the beginning of a situation, I knew that there was something wrong, but I decided to move forward either way. Okay, and the relationship with your intuition has a lot to do with what you do about it because you're going to feel something. You're going to have an impression on someone or a situation, and the signals will be sent to you, and you'll be like, okay, maybe I should leave, maybe I should drop this, maybe I should, you know, forget about this person. But what the problem is that that thought, that idea, once it's born in your head, it causes an emotion. When you feel it, when you sense it, okay, there's something that I need to pay attention to that my brain is trying to tell me. You also have an emotional reaction to that new information because it really feels like just a error message coming up in your brain like, but this person is not good. This is not the right situation. There's something wrong here. And then you can feel any sort of ways because we often go into situations with hope that things will turn out for the best if you're not a pessimistic person. I am not a pessimistic person. I try to be realistic most of the time, but sometimes I'm just really excited with the prospect of whatever situation working out. I mean, especially when you're meeting a new person or making new friends or in a new job. So you go into it with a positive mindset, right? However, when a negative thought, what you would consider a negative thought, but it's actually your intuition, comes in, we sometimes challenge that thought. We sometimes challenge that feeling because we think, is that real? Is that really happening? Is this really what I'm feeling? And that can lead you to making a wrong decision because we sometimes second guess ourselves. And that's a big mistake, okay? If you ever had the impression that something is not for you, or that something doesn't feel right, or that a person is not really who they seem to be, you're probably right, okay? If something feels off, because it really is. So don't second guess yourself. Trust your ability to know if something is safe or not, if something is good for you or not. Because deep down, this is your own body, this is your own brain taking care of you, okay? The brain does not like suffering, the brain does not like pain. So, whenever there is a feeling or a sensation that something's wrong, something's off, right? That's your brain telling you, I'm trying to avoid that pain we've experienced before. And the older you get, the better you get at your intuition, I think, because as I said, it's like your brain storing information over time and then using those little signs, right? When we talk about like body language and facial expressions, our brains are able to recognize patterns in people and how they behave and how they talk to you. And I can give you an example. For example, um, I had few friends when I moved to a big city and I started like working in a big city and I was living on my own and all this stuff. And I made some friends back in that day. And I never really felt close to those people. I always felt like I was a little bit like a sidekick, you know? And what I realized is that they never said it to me. They never said it to me. But I felt it anyway. I felt excluded. And it was really weird because I really couldn't at first pinpoint what made me feel that way because they would talk to me, they would ask me out, we would go on, you know, we would do things together on the weekend, we would just have a regular friendship and talk and, you know. However, one thing I started to notice is that those people, they would sometimes talk to each other as if I wasn't in the room. And at first, I didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, that's just the way they are. But then that started to repeat itself like over and over again. And that's when I realized, yeah, okay, maybe these people don't like me. Because when you are trying to get into new circles and trying to make new friends, it's really easy to just tag along with people, right? But when people actually like you, it shows. When people actually want you to be around, you will know. Okay, so it's really important to remember that you know what it's like to be loved. You know what it's like to be desired, and when people really want you to be around, you know what it feels like. So anything that's not like that, not like what you are familiar with or how you think you should be treated, it's probably the opposite. Those people probably don't care about you. Those people probably don't want you to be around. And it might be a little sad at the beginning to acknowledge that, but it's true. Another example. Recently, I had a little fling. I don't like to use this word. But usually when I meet someone, I have that like that very first impression, you know? Like a first initial feeling, like Stevie Nicks says in her song Crystal. I love Stevie Nicks. Anyway, and she says, and I think that when you get that first impression of someone, you might be mistaken, okay? You might be, just having a preconception of who they are. And most often, I build a very different image in my head of what that person is, of who that person is. And however, I also get a very honest feeling when I meet someone. I get a very first, sorry about the noise. I get a very first, real, honest feeling of who they are. And it's usually right. It's usually right. Because people can't really hide who they are for long. Especially when you get into like romantic relationships, it's really easy. The first thing people do is that they try to hide because it's an instinct, right? We want to show, we want to portray ourselves as like the perfect version of ourselves that we aren't. So, but even then, we can't fake for too long. It starts to show, the mask starts to slip, and you get to see those people for who they really are. And when you do see, believe it, okay? Don't be trying to create a person in your head that doesn't exist. And usually, what helps me get this first initial feeling about a person, it's my intuition. You look at them and you just get a general idea of who they are. And as I said, the older you get, the easier it gets to look at someone and see, this one is a player. Or, this one is okay. This one is nice. This person I can fuck around with. Because this idea of like, some people are dangerous to you, okay? Some people are like, they're going to harm you emotionally. And you know the types, narcissistics, whatever type of people. And some people that are just like, they just get off of making people suffer. And they are dangerous to you. However, you need to be able to recognize the people that you can fuck around with. Like, really, you can build a relationship, talk to, engage in conversation, go out, get to know. Don't go for the dangerous type. It never ends well. Okay? Don't go for the dangerous kind of people. It always going to end up with you, you know. It's like Taylor Swift says, I knew you were trouble when you walked in. And we usually know, okay? We usually know when someone is trouble. So trust your gut. That's what I'm trying to say to you. Trust your gut. Because whenever you get an impression of someone, that's probably the real person they are. So I met this guy. I met a guy a couple months ago. It didn't work out, of course, because the first time I met him, I was like, okay, he's really hot. Okay, I think this is going to be great. But I also had this feeling, really strong feeling, that it was not going to work out. And for a moment, I thought, oh, maybe that's just my insecurity. Maybe it's just me being insecure, thinking that I can't, like, really make this man fall in love with me or something like that. Maybe I'm just feeling anxious. Maybe whatever. But it was a knowledge so strong. Because I remember that after our first day, I went back home. And on the way home, I could feel it like it was true. Like it was the reality of all the circumstances. Was like, this is not, I'm not gonna have this man. This is not for me. I just knew it. No matter how much I liked him, no matter how excited I was, because the date went really well, we had a good time, it didn't matter because when I left, I just knew this is not for me. And I battled against that feeling. And you know what happens? I was regrettably wrong because I should have known from the beginning. If I had known from the beginning that that feeling was the truth, I wouldn't have, wasted the next 2 months on this relationship, if we can call it. But it was like, and then that spiral came in. I was anxious. There were ups and downs. I was emotionally vulnerable at times. He would make promises that he wouldn't keep. He would say things that he wouldn't do, that he didn't really mean. And I was feeling played. I knew I was being played. And that very first day that we met, I had the feeling, that intuition that came over and said, this is not the one. This is not the person for you. But I decided to go against it. I was like, no, this is just me. I'm just being insecure. I can do this. This guy's, it's just a guy. I'm gonna be fine. I am fine. I definitely am fine. But the process of getting fine wasn't easy because I had to go through, you know, an acceptance phase of being like, shit, like, no, not again. I'll have to drop this ball. I mean, I have to drop this. Sorry. I'll have to drop this relationship because I'm not with the right person. This is not for me. And the signs were just there. After like the first few weeks of getting to know the guy, things shifted. He started acting weird. He started saying weird things. He said that he was interested in a relationship, but he would disappear. I was like, what? What? This is not for me. And I was right. So since day one, so it's really hard. It's a natural human instinct. Sometimes you really want to see if that's really what's happening, and sometimes you need to give yourself some time, some grace. But I'm usually always right. Another situation happened. Intuition is really good when you're trying to get into a relationship, okay? When you're meeting new people. That's usually when it works for me. And with some opportunities in life, I also get an intuition that that's what I should do. Even when I'm really scared, I think that's what I should do. And then I feel peace. And then I understand, yeah, I should probably go on that direction. But when it comes to people, what happens is I get a thought out of the blue that I think this is not me. I'm not thinking this. Where did this come from? And I remember once I met a guy and he had recently broken up with his girlfriend, not recently, like about a year or so. And he said something like, I mean, it was a topic on the first day. That should have been a sign in itself. And I remember thinking, I don't think he's over his ex. And I was right, of course. But you see, I think that was a really intuition. I think that was just like obvious. But it's funny to know that you get the right perception of people sometimes. You really do. And what do you do with that? You need to follow your gut, okay? However, sometimes you can confuse anxiety and intuition. And that's something that I've done many times. But I want to talk to you about that on the next video. For now, I'm just trying to give you some reasons to trust your gut and how to recognize it. It's something that can really get you out of trouble and really help you save time because time is the matter. And time is of the essence, okay, of living and existing. And it's important that you understand that your intuition, it's an asset. It's something that you can use in your own favor if you know how to use it, how to recognize it, okay? But how do I recognize what is intuition? What's anxiety? Well, we can talk about this on another video. Once it's ready, I'm going to put it right here and you can click on it to watch as well. And bye.